This is Jeff Krisman, and I'm extremely joyous and very grateful today to be here today with Lorraine Goldbloom. Lorraine, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate this.
Oh, it's good to see you, Jeff. I've been looking forward to this.
Absolutely. And today, the reason that we have gathered today is for the first installment of the Finding Present series. And so what I thought I would do is start out by asking you, Lorraine, to just share just a little bit briefly for anyone who might be listening that is not familiar with this, just a little bit about it.
Yes, thank you. The Finding Present series is something I've been working on for a number of years now. And it really it developed as a way to talk to people about healing, and a way to discuss issues. I teach something called Vortex Healing, which is a divine healing art. It's an energetic healing modality. And of course, as a healing modality, we work with issues. So it becomes necessary to sort of talk about what that process means and to bring awareness to what issues are and how they hold us. So I would do a lot of introductory talks and healings, sort of discussing the nature of vortex healing and how it works and why it works. But where things really got interesting was when I started to get personal with it. When I started talking to people about specific issues that they were experiencing directly, anxiety or heartbreak or, loneliness. And when I began to speak in those terms, it became real for people. And suddenly, this healing wasn't just sort of an out there touchy-feely woo-woo kind of thing. It became a very real way to meet our pain. And that's what so many of us are looking for, sort of a safe way to be able to meet our pain and work with it and to be free. So the Finding Present series became an ongoing series of events and articles and a lot of other things to just talk about the nature of issues and how they hold us and to bring, healing to that. And, it's happened in several formats. I've done a number of in-person events and online events. I did a workshop at the Omega Institute. I did a series on a cable show called Oneness and Wellness. And I think it's really taking off because, oddly enough, as soon as we start talking about our issues, whereas issues by nature are very isolating, our issues kind of keep us set apart from everyone. When we begin to share and bring light to them, it actually brings us together. And so, the interest in the series and work like this is growing, and it's becoming ongoing.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And I was going to say, I really do get the sense just with the energy and here, this really is bringing us together. And I also wanted to make sure that it's very important. I also, this is a very heartfelt one to thank everyone for participating in this today. And thank you, Lorraine, for coordinating this as well. This is very exciting.
I did. I invited some really cool people today. I invited some of my favorite people today, because I want to, share this work with them. And, that some of them very instrumental in helping me to develop the Finding Presence series. And, the work is meant to be shared. And so what I hope to do today is sort of talk a little bit about the nature of issue and the topic of the day, the issue du jour. And get people's observations and feedback about, the discussion. And then off camera, I'd like to offer a guided meditation, which is sort of part one of the healing and a healing itself, to, take the awareness that we're bringing to the issues a step further and bring that into healing and awakening.
I love that. Absolutely. Very excited. And I was going to ask you, just to get things started, in terms of if I could ask you, what the first issue that will be covered today, and also kind of a compound question, what that issue is, and also why that you chose for this to be the first issue to speak about.
Yeah, the first issue I like to start off with is the issue of shame. When I start the series, when I know I'm going to embark on the series, the issue I always start with is shame, because shame is it's so hard. It's so fundamental to our experience of being.
Yeah.
And it is, if I'm looking for a way to describe issues, which is often what we look for, an issue is anything that keeps you out of being present, and an issue, it has expression in the system, meaning the physical body and the energetic system and our minds and our personalities and all of that. But it has an identity, and it keeps us in an experience of isolation. And shame, is a great place to start, because shame hides. Shame is inherently isolating because it hides us from the rest of the world. We go into a very guarded place with shame, and it even hides from us. Our shame actually uses other issues to mask itself, and it can be a very difficult issue to work with. And I will probably be referring back to the issue of shame as we carry on with the series and explore other things. So it has been, in my experience, one of the most challenging issues to work on, because it's so fundamental, so fundamental.
Oh yeah, and just really for the purpose of clarification, I was going to ask as well, just for anyone, as you're working with this, if someone were to ask you, what is your definition of shame, and maybe just a little bit about why I know you've spoken some here. I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to share.
Yeah,
or
no, I
felt
think
moved to
I think
share in
it's
terms of why it's so
important to
difficult.
talk about, because we often think of shame as, the moment we've been embarrassed or where we feel bad about something, but it's actually more core than that. There's someone, for people who are interested in the topic of shame, there's someone named Brene Brown who's done some wonderful work on shame. As a matter of fact, I think she has the most popular YouTube video ever of anything. And she talks about the topic of shame, and she offered something that I thought was very profound. And she used a definition that, guilt is about something you've done, but shame is about something you are and what you believe to be. So our core shame is that place in us that doesn't feel worthy of being loved. I mean, it's really that core. It's really that deep. And that pain creates its own kind of reaction. In order to manage that pain and to hide that pain, we compensate. We compensate in all sorts of ways. We get angry. We try to be better. We try to be perfect. We deflect. That's why I say shame is an issue that sort of holds a lot of other issues together. It's that place in us that just doesn't feel worthy of being loved by anyone else, by ourselves, by God or the divine. And that's a very hard place to meet. And it takes a lot of sort of picking apart to realize, oh, that is what's going on. And another reason I like to open with shame is that it is universal. We all experience issues in different ways, but something in all of us knows that. We all have that place where we don't feel worthy of being loved. And so to take a safe space to explore that in ourselves, and what is our coping mechanism? How do we manage that issue? How do we compensate for that belief? Is worth the while. And it can be a very profound healing.
Yeah, thank you. And I was wondering too, just in your years of working with people, if you've seen different ways in which shame presents itself, or does shame look different, so to speak, with different people depending on who you're working with and their background?
Yeah, I think it looks different in everybody. I mean, that's the thing about issues, is that we all, there are universal issues. We all know what shame is on some level. We all know anxiety. We all know these things, but how they express is unique for every individual. So I think I'll kind of open with my shame, an example of my shame on the table. And in the moment I sort of realized how deeply an issue can hold you. And I think I might have told you the story, Jeff, in the very first interview we did when we were just getting to know each other. It was a moment when I was getting certified to teach yoga.
Oh, yeah.
You remember the
Yeah.
story? I tell
Yes.
this sometimes as an example of what an issue can do. The short version is that, before Vortex Healing, I was a personal trainer and a yoga instructor and, did a lot of different things. And this was a moment where I was taking a test to become a certified yoga instructor. And it wasn't the actual test, it was kind of a practice practical. Meaning that you would lead part of a class and then the instructors for the certification program would offer you feedback. And so I was going into this, to be quite honest, feeling pretty good about myself. I was feeling good. I was like, okay, I got this. I already have this, personal training background. Technically, I feel like I know my stuff. I have a background of working with groups, so I was pretty comfortable working with the group and leading a class, and I'm feeling okay, and I do my thing. And then I await the feedback from the instructors, and I'll never forget it. There was sort of this uncomfortable silence. And one of them said that, I clearly was very good at what I was doing technically, but she offered that I just didn't seem so interested in the people that I was working with, that I actually seemed more interested in showing off what I knew, in demonstrating my knowledge and competence than actually helping the people that I was working with. And it really hit me hard. It hit me like a slap across the face because I knew that it was true. And I had to really go home and think about why it was true, though. And I remember, going home, I refer to it as the day I realized I was full of shit. I don't know if I can curse on your program. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's totally fine. Yeah.
Well, I just did. But that's how I think of it, because what I realized in sitting with this feedback was that I actually did care very deeply. And I did want to help the people that I was instructing, but that I felt so incompetent in a particular way that I learned to manage myself to put on this air of being the expert. So I created a mask, if you will, of being, the knowledgeable expert. And when I was working with people, I was working through this mask. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Yes.
So
Yes.
it was actually coming from a place of deep insecurity. It was coming from a place of deep shame, where I really believed that I didn't know what I was doing, that I really wasn't the one to be able to bring love and healing to this. And so I was working, it was like armor for me. And when I realized this, I would love to tell you that it was just, I did that because I was nervous and that was how I compensated for it. But to be quite honest, when I really thought about it, I realized that this is something that I was doing in every aspect of my life. So why I'm telling the story here and now, it's not just that I was embarrassed about my behavior. It's not just that I feel bad about what I did and how I handled myself in the morning. It was an example of shame, of pure shame, of how that issue caused me to go into a kind of behavioral mechanism, a mask, that was actually keeping me separate from the very people I was trying to help. And I cried when I don't know if you ever have those aha moments when you realize, oh
yeah.
my God,
Oh,
I am not present with this and I need to do something. And I didn't have any tools at the time. This was long before Vortex Healing. And I just remember crying on my way home. I'm so full of shit. And all I could do was just try to promise myself that I'm not going to be like that anymore. That's not who I really want to be. That's not who I really am. And I just decided the next day when I would go into work, I would meet my client and I would listen. And I would just try to, one person at a time, one moment at a time, listen to what they needed. And then I would offer whatever I had, I would bring it to the table and offer it to them. And I just, moment to moment tried to break that down. But it was sort of an ongoing realization of how that issue affected me in all of my relationships. and all of my, and how I compensated, in intimate relationships with my parents, with my friends, and every situation I had something going on, and it was really keeping me out of being present with people. And so that's why we work on our issues. That's why we do that work. And slowly over time, you learn, you manage, and you heal.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. And I'm so appreciative that you shared that, because what was coming up for me intuitively was that with shame, and this is just as a human being who has experience at it, not that I know anything else about it for anyone else, that there's this part of this that is we're unconscious of it, or maybe we're somewhere in between unconscious and conscious, and we're conflicted. I don't want to necessarily get overly circular, but one of the things I was going to ask you about is if we are somewhat conscious of it, even if it's not completely, in terms of how we recognize if we are having trouble owning it, or how we're in other words, if we have resistance, to calling ourselves on our own stuff, so to speak.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to meet shame, because shame wants to hide from itself. So it disguises itself as other issues, and in my example, I created this kind of competence. And on one level, I am competent. So it's easy to sort of work that angle. But if you follow that competence through, where does that come from? It comes from a level of insecurity. If you follow the insecurity deeper, it'll lead you to that place that just doesn't believe it's worthy. So what I do, especially if I don't know what's going on with me, like I can see, I follow the tension, and I follow the mask, what do we portray to the world? What is important for us to get out there, and how do we want to be seen? And is there any information in that? Are we afraid to be seen in a particular way? How important is it for us to be seen as competent or intelligent or creative, or, and follow that, because we all create our masks, and they come from somewhere. And the thing with masks, do you know what I mean by masks? Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
how we present ourselves to the Lord. The thing about masks is that, you create this way of interacting with the world. You craft this persona on some level, and it's either effective or it's not. Right. So if it's not, well, then that's unfortunate, because you come off poorly. If it's effective, and you craft a persona that people respond well to, and, then part of you, if you have any awareness of what's really going on, part of you feels like a fraud, because on some level you recognize, what people are responding to and interacting with is my projection of how I want to be, or how I think I should be, not who I really am. And so when it works, there can be this sort of fraud effect. And that's another way that shame can manifest. If you sort of follow that thread and explore that, well, where am I not really feeling my authentic self? And why not? Just a series of questions. And part of the Finding Presence format, if you will, is just asking a series of questions about where these negative experiences show up in your life. How are you triggered, and what does it mean? Following that thread to try to get to the core of what's going on. So sometimes that's just where we start. We start with where and how we feel uncomfortable, and we dig a little. And if we have enough courage and enough love, enough self-love to meet that place in compassion, it'll lead us to truth.
Yeah, thank you. And I was going to ask you as well, once we are able to, or will, I guess I should say willing, I was going to say able, but I also realize there's a component of willingness. What anything you might share as far as what we can learn from the issue of shame and our struggles with it.
I don't know that we learn a lot from the issue of shame itself. If anything, we can embrace a process of bringing compassion to it. Because, we in Vortex Healing, we talk a lot about bringing love to issues, meeting them in love. If we meet something in judgment, it's just another way of perpetuating that experience of separation. But if we can really bring love to that, if we can find the place in us that is hurt and feeling unworthy of bringing love and be willing to bring love to that, that's transformative. So, I'm often saying in Vortex Healing, we're learning about a process, not a product.
Yeah.
If we can learn the process of bringing love to the parts of us that we don't feel are worthy of being loved, that's the deepest transformation. And then, we just recognize it for what it is. Okay, oh, this is an issue of shame. It's not true. Of course, I'm worthy of being loved. Of course, this part of me of worthy of love. It's just an issue, and an issue can always be worked with. But we have to recognize it for what it is, which is why crafting language about issues is so important. When it's just a bad feeling, then we can't work with that. We just feel bad and we hide and we compensate and we do that. But when we call it, when it's actually brought to the light, okay, this is uncomfortable. This is extraordinarily difficult. It makes me feel terrible, but it's an issue, and an issue can be worked with. And that's kind of where this work is going.
Yeah, that's so hopeful, because as you were speaking that, I was getting the sense that, choosing to take that mask off, for the first time, around a particular issue. I get the sense that there can be a lot of challenges with that and insecurity. And I get the sense that I don't know if I'm open to being wrong, that this is a process in terms of the healing once you decide to take the mask off. And
yeah, we do what we can in the moment, and it's an ongoing process. I don't claim to be completely free from the issue of shame. I don't claim to have be completely free of masks or anything like that. It's an ongoing exploration of where is our tension? Where am I hiding? What is my behavior that's compensating? What am I compensating for? It's an exploration of that. And we just keep going, and then we reach freedom on a certain level, and we enjoy that, and we recognize the grace. And then we go a little deeper. And if we can have more of an appreciation of the process, then no given thing is so terrible. Then that issue that's so terrible, that holds us so deeply, it's hard, but it's just an issue. And as we continue to go, then we kind of have a new, and it sounds twisted, appreciation for our issues, because that becomes the pathway to freedom. You can't be free from something that you don't realize is holding you. So being able to call it, see it, recognize, bring love to it, transform it, that's the healing process. And the more we're willing to engage with it, the more it's willing to engage with us. So it can, although be very difficult and humbling, it's also very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that too. And I get the sense that just that willingness or that openness, even if we don't have all the answers, that at least that it is possible through doing this work. And that's what I was going to ask you, just as an example. And I don't know if this is if you think this would be helpful, just getting a sense of maybe that process. In other words, if someone is undertaking Vortex Healing and working with you or with someone in that particular modality, just getting some sense of what it would, how that actually would work and how it helps, or how it can help.
Yeah, well, Vortex Healing is extraordinary in the way that it works, because it's not only works on an energetic level, it works on a consciousness level. So our issues, any issues, are very complicated. They show up, a good issue is going to have multiple expressions. It's going to create tension and, conditioning. We use that word conditioning in the physical body. You're going to see it in the energy system, the chakras, the pathways. You're going to see it there. So, Vortex Healing has the energetics to move the imprinting, the conditioning that an issue creates on the form. But it's real magic, and it is very magical lineage, comes with that consciousness component, the thing that goes in there and recognizes the identity that gets created, right? Thing that says, I am unworthy. Not just, oh, I'm experiencing an issue about feeling unworthy, but the thing that really believes it, that I am this. There's a consciousness component that comes in, sort of a divine consciousness component that comes in, that meets that separation consciousness, that brings in that small personal belief of unworthiness, and that's met in love. And that's the transformation, bringing the difference between, I am unworthy and, oh, I have an issue that can be worked with. That's all the difference in the world.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that space is everything. And so it's incredibly freeing. And so when I talk about vortex healing and I describe it, I demonstrate it like a healing modality because you feel better, you get freedom from your issues. But on that level, it's really more about awakening. It's about awakening out of the story that our issues create. That belief we have that I am unworthy of being loved, that's just a story that's been created by our own experience of pain. It's not true. It's our experience. That experience is real. It's valid. But it's not true. So that's the healing. As we begin to release conditioning, that things become more fluid, and then that identity gets broken, and then we have transformation, and we kind of keep going. We, very often we're targeting, our worst pain first, right? I work here, I work here, I work here. And then as we get more fluid, we recognize, freedom from the deeper identities that come.
Yeah, thank you so much. And before I was going to ask you, in terms of with this series, what the next issue is, I thought I would back up just briefly. And at this point, I think that's all the questions that are coming up for me at the moment. I was going to just really open things up for you and give you the space and time if there's anything else that I forgot to ask, or anything else that you wanted to share about this particular issue.
Not really, but I would love to hear from, like I said, I invited some really wonderful people to participate today. So I would love to hear from any of you guys, if you have any observations or questions or experience that you'd like to share in the context of shame or your work with it. Does anyone have anything they'd like to mention, talk about, or ask that I haven't thought of? It's a juicy issue. Go ahead, Denise.
Oh, yeah.
Lorraine, I was so moved by your story, and I thought that, I really think that shame is such an interesting topic, because to me, it's like one of our darkest areas, because it's where we disown ourselves.
Yes.
Where we really stand in direct opposition to ourselves, and because we are unable to accept ourselves in that area. And so I don't know, I think part of the reason I was moved by your story is because to me it's a really brave story, because it's, facing the thing you are most afraid of. I mean, I'm not putting words in your mouth now, but
right.
But the other thing too about shame too is, it's this sort of shrinking and disappearing. It's the areas where we're disappearing. And I thought the question that Jeff asked about what we learn from shame, I just kept thinking about it. And it's a really good question. And I wonder if maybe part of it is that it in some ways shows us that there's so much more of us, because shame shrinks those areas. We're shrinking away in those areas of shame. And it's almost like a reminder that there's so much more to you,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Anyway,
no, I think that's beautifully said. I think that's beautifully said. And I do, it's a question I commonly ask in the Finding Presence series. What do you get out of having this issue? It sounds a little twisted and judgmental to ask it like that, but very often if we ask the question, we can we begin to sort of see how we manage our issues. And I think with shame, if we're willing to meet it, and what is required in meeting it is the love and the compassion. And if we're willing to bring the love and the compassion there, you're absolutely right, Denise. We find that way that we do hide in the shadows, that we do see ourselves as small, that we back off, that we deflect. We all have different ways. So to embrace that process of bringing love to that, if we can bring love to our own shame, we can bring love to anything. And it allows us to be more compassionate to others as well. Because it's very important, in order to really be present with others, we really need to learn to be present with ourselves and our own issues. And if we can do that with this issue, with the deepest place of unworthiness that we know, we can do anything. We can do anything. I believe that. So thank you. Great. Does anyone have anything else? Laura, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff and Lorraine. It's just been a wonderful conversation and I've gotten so much out of it. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on how shame can be passed down through families or inherited through family values, because it can feel really, in my experience, being raised Catholic, breaking.
Yes.
Anyone can relate. Breaking with shame can feel like abandoning some really important family values. And I think culturally we're moving away from shame around bodies and sexuality and these different natural expressions that's been so much a part of the healing movements for the past few decades. But there's still a lot in there. It's still very prevalent. So I was just curious to hear if either of you have any thoughts on that connection with shame.
Sure. Excellent point. I do believe that shame is modeled, that we learn shame, from our parents because they learned it from their parents, and, times change and it may look differently. But it is a universal issue and we all have it. And then something that you brought up, which I think is brilliant, the shame of losing our shame. No, seriously, the shame of like, well, shouldn't you have some shame? Shouldn't, you feel bad? Shouldn't, we're taught to keep ourselves in check. We're taught not to be egotistical by, holding on to a certain amount of shame. And that is not helpful. And it's funny, my parents are they were raised Catholic in a strict Catholic upbringing, and then they decided to raise my brother and I outside of the church because they had their issues with it, but the modeling is still in the system. So when you did something wrong, it's not just you made a mistake, it's that you're a bad person. And I know that neither my parents believe that, but it's what was modeled in their system without ever saying that that was in them, and that's what we learned. And so it takes a lot to break that pattern. And even though I think we are becoming more aware and we are acknowledging and recognizing that there shouldn't be body shaming and all of that, it still happens. But sometimes we walk, we talk the talk without walking the walk. We can sort of push ourselves through without really doing the inner work. And so it is an ongoing, really humbling process. So we have to keep going. I don't know that there is a simple solution. We just have to really work to acknowledge and meet our shame wherever we have it, because if we can't meet it in ourselves, we can't break the pattern for anyone else, And then if we can, then we become a model for something new. Without saying it, without preaching, without telling people what to do, if we can meet ourselves and our own experience of being in form and love, well, then that will create a new way of being. It's kind of the best we can do. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's just been my observation. It was great, Laura. Thank you. Kathy, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. This is very interesting. I've been enjoying the conversation. And I've been reading a book, Viola Davis's Finding Me. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but it's really interesting. And she talks about the deep shame of being Black and being poor, and how that really affected her, and how it was, she calls shame eviscerating. And I thought, that's really good. It's just like it takes away all the power.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So she found healing through acting.
Yeah. Well, she's an extraordinary talent. I haven't read the book, but you got me curious. And yeah, I can only imagine that life experience. So, thank you. Yeah. Andrea, how are you doing?
Thank you so much, Chef and Lorraine, for this great conversation. Lorraine, I had all this aspect that you were talking about of feeling a fraud, et cetera, and working through this, as you said, has brought me a lot of relief, even though I still have to work on many more layers. And for me, there was within that, there was a deep feeling of feeling unsafe, of not feeling safe in myself, not feeling safe enough to speak, safe enough to be, and safe enough even within me in relation to myself.
Thank you for bringing that up. You're absolutely right. And, in order to, a very important point to talk about, which I don't know if I've said clearly in my own experience of working with shame, is that you have to feel safe enough to meet it. When we talk about bringing love and everything, if you don't feel safe enough to meet it, if you don't have a safe space to meet that in whatever form that takes, it isn't necessarily a therapist, but, a friend over coffee, a place to sort of air that and bring that to life. If you don't have a safe space to do that, it's very hard to do anything else. So that's a very keen observation, that in order to do this work, we need to feel safe enough to do it. And so finding what that means for each of us as individuals is a very important first step to doing this work and meeting our shame. So thank you for that. That's important. Very important. Go ahead, Min. Min, are you there?
Take the mute off.
Gotcha.
You bring up in some ways, relief that once you recognize something as an issue, that there is a process that you can go through to address the issue. The challenge is to first realize that the issue is part of you, but it's also simply an issue. So how would you help someone who has never looked at it that way as an issue to work on? How would you help them learn to identify it as an issue? Am I making sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to work on an issue if you don't realize you have it.
Yeah.
And I've talked a lot in certain situations on how our deepest issues are the ones we don't even know that we have. We're so deeply identified with them that that's just our experience of life, right?
Mhm.
That's just our, so the way that I would suggest, and there's a sort of another story for another time, but what I usually suggest to people is, just begin to ask questions about what's taking up space in your consciousness. Where is your tension? Where is your mask, right? Where are you not feeling like your authentic self, whatever that means to you? Follow that tension and see where it leads. That's why a big part of the Finding Presence series is just asking questions. I don't have any answers, but ask a lot of questions about where does this, why is this situation triggering? What is this upset about? Is this really about anger? Is it about hurt? Is it about loss? What is that? Just by noticing that you're uncomfortable, being okay and feeling safe enough to feel uncomfortable, and then following that thread through to find, the core of what that issue is about. That just comes with love, with courage, and with persistence. And I personally believe that if we really want to be free, that's the ongoing process, and we do it, forever. So long as we're informed, we're going to have issues, and sometimes it'll be clear as day, and sometimes we'll just feel bad. And when we feel bad, we just start asking questions and hopefully be willing to meet it in love. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Min.
you.
And Denise.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Laura's comment. It made me wonder, Laura just brought up issues like body shaming or body shame and Catholic shame. And it made me wonder if there is a connection between shame and control, because culturally shame is used to control people, or at least that's what it seems like to me. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, sure.
And then also in response to Min, I think it was Min or no, I'm sorry, it was Andrea who said that it was an issue of safety. I also wonder if it is a survival issue, because it's the place where we don't allow ourselves to exist. And so to me, that seems like a root chakra, first chakra issue.
Survival is safety. Safety
Yeah.
is survival on a primal level. So I think the thing with shame is that, of course, it ties into all of these issues, which is why I start with shame. When you see shame, you're going to find some kind of way to manage it, some kind of control issue, some kind of mechanism, whether it's trying to be perfect or, an anger, we're going to find some kind of mechanism that we're using to manage. So very often we see that first and then follow it to the core. So that's why I start with shame, because I think in ongoing finding presence sessions, I'm going to be referring back to shame because it holds a lot of other stuff together. And so being willing to have a context for that is incredibly valuable. And so we meet it to the best of our ability. We're all works in progress. Thank you guys. That was great. It's so much better with your feedback and your questions and observations. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I didn't know at this point, Lorraine, if there was anything else. And this really was wonderful. I really enjoyed being able to hear all of the questions. And yeah, it was wonderful to be able to sit back and feel like I felt like I was a participant as well. So I appreciate that.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
No, it's been great. Well, where we go from here is, off camera, I'm going to offer a healing. I'm going to offer, the finding present structures that I do sort of a 2-part healing. I do a series of questions to help get people's awareness into their personal experience of the issue we're talking about. And while I'm doing that, I'm offering, high-level vortex healing tools that help bring clarity and truth to that. And then I'm going to do the traditional, vortex healing to help release that issue on an energetic level, on a consciousness level. So, that's what we'll be doing, after we sort of finish this conversation. But I find this conversation in general, although, everyone who's listening to this podcast won't receive the healing directly, just the awareness that a conversation like this brings is very healing, which is one reason I really want to develop the Finding Presence series, because I think people resonate with this. And being able to talk about it, they like, oh yeah, I know what that is. I see that in my own life. And just that awareness is the first important step towards freedom.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lorraine. This has been wonderful, and I'm just very honored to help in some small way with this, and just really appreciate everything that you shared. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. And I hope to do it again. I hope to do next one. I was thinking, I had a thought. I'll get you guys but I was thinking our next session, anxiety.
Yeah.
Does that sound, yeah. Does that sound good? It usually, when you offer a session healing towards anxiety, usually people, want to talk like that. Well, I'll get your input, but that's what I was thinking for our next Finding Presence episode. So
absolutely. Really looking forward. Thank you. Yeah, this is great.
Thank you so much, Jeff.